Hello and welcome to the PE Insights podcast brought to you by PE Scholar. Welcome back to another episode. Today we're joined by the fantastic Louise Hacking. Louise is a PE Scholar Associate. She's also a lecturer of physical education at Leeds Beckett University and a previous leader of physical education, passionate about empowering teachers and breaking down barriers, which leads us into today's topic. In today's episode, we talk about a potentially sensitive and taboo topic of periods and sports bras and how they act as potential barriers for young girls in PE, physical activity and sport. So what we'd ask you to do is to reflect on our conversation today and really think about, can we remove the stigma from this area and positively approach the topic so that we can encourage young girls to try to remove this barrier and to allow them to have more positive experiences of PE in school. We also address male teachers as positive allies and trying to increase their confidence and comfortability of talking about this sensitive topic with girls. And we also discuss the physical, mental and social tensions surrounding this topic. Louise is a real advocate for young girls, and what she shares in this episode is incredibly powerful, and I can't wait to share this message with you. Good morning, Louise. Welcome to the PE Insights podcast.
Hi, Nathan. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm really looking forward to this one. Thank you very much for taking the time to join me this morning. You sent some notes through before we started about the topics we're going to discuss today, so really excited to share this with a listener. So let's start where we always start. Introduce yourself to the listeners. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your educational journey so far.
So I grew up out in the countryside in the northwest of England, so a very little village, just on sort of the gateway to Lake District, which was absolutely brilliant, although maybe growing up didn't really appreciate how amazing it was at the time. But really great place. And I was lucky enough to have parents that sort of took me to lots of different activities. I'm the youngest of three and my siblings are a lot older. So, I got put a lot in like, after school activities and holiday clubs to keep me busy and keep me out of trouble, which I really liked. And sort of part of it for me was growing up where I did. I wasn't local to any of my friends. So going to sports clubs or going to activities meant that I got to see my friends. So did, all the activities at primary school, was on all the teams. And then when I got to secondary school again, similarly would stay behind after school most days in order to play sport, to see my friends. I actually got put in, when I started school, I got put in a different population to my friends. So doing the after school clubs meant I got to see them and got to spend time with them. It was partly sort of the netball, the hockey, rugby, all the different sports just to keep busy. Through school, got to go on lots of school trips with sport. We even went to Australia playing hockey and netball, which was amazing. We did the Isle of Man tour every year, which was always really good fun. And I was sort of seeing that sport wasn't just about playing sport; it was more, you can have all these opportunities through playing sport as well. And so, being from a small village, like it's really important in the community that sort of everyone chips in and helps, and that's how sort of community sport works. So my dad ran the cricket club, the cricket team, the under-16 cricket team. So I was always part of that and would go along there. And my mum was part of the coaching the junior badminton team. So again, I would go to that and play along there. But I also like to help. So as I sort of grew older, I would help out there as well, as not only because my parents needed me to be there to, ease on babysitting, but also I really enjoyed doing that. And helping the younger children develop, and something that I really enjoyed. For my Duke of Edinburgh, I did my volunteering with a tennis club and helped out there. And that was where I got one of my first jobs as being an assistant tennis coach with sort of the primary school age students. And I really, really enjoyed that. So that when it came to sort of picking what you want to do in life, do you want to go to university? That sort of big question that you're not really sure about. All I could say to my parents was, I don't want to work in an office. I don't want to sit down all day. But also I really love coaching tennis. I really love being with the children. So that sort of led me quite easily onto training to be a PE teacher. So I went to Leeds Beckett University. I was actually on a QTS course. So I'm not sure if they're still there anymore. It's more the PGCE, but I did a 3-year QTS course where we did a different placement every year. And the placements were really good for me because it gave me a wide variety of experience from sort of the Leeds and Bradford area that was very different to the sort of the countryside school that I'd been to. So that was really great. I had some fantastic lecturers and learned a lot there. Then I moved to get my first job in Leeds, where I was there for 10 years. It was a school over in East Leeds. It's sort of a working class area with, at the time, not very good sports facilities at all. Luckily, we got the Building Schools for the Future grant, and a lovely forecourt sports hall was built. But it was a great time. And I, at that time, I worked in the 10 years under 3 heads of department, all of which were male. And that school itself was, there was lots of rugby league players. It was a very rugby league area, and a lot of the boys' teams did fantastically well from that school. Pardon? Yeah, 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 shocking. But it was really big in that area. And one of the things that I sort of thought early on is that there is a disparity here between girls and boys. And, I would sometimes clash heads a little bit with my heads of department who were male, who were arguing that, why are the girls not as good? Or, what's going on with the girls? Why are they, not as fast or quick or whatever it is that. And I was saying there's not as many opportunities, and there's also barriers that girls face there. So that was sort of ignited my sort of passion to want to champion girls and to make sure they were getting equitable opportunities as well. So at Corpus, which is the school that I worked at, I sort of moved across into the pastoral side because I was attendance lead, and then I was head of year 7 and 8 in transition for 5 years, which I really loved. I loved being part of the pastoral side, and at one point thought maybe this is it for me. I really like, knowing the bigger picture of a school and really supporting students to be the best they can be. But something underneath me was also wanting to champion the fact that, there isn't as many role models for women in sport, for PE teachers. At that point in time, I think there was about 5 female heads of PE in the Leeds area and maybe 60 male heads of PE. So there wasn't a lot. And it was something that I wanted to change, and I wanted to make sure that, there was a female voice out there in leadership to make sure that things were changing in PE. So as a result of that, I sort of took a sideways step to a new school, an all-through school where I was head of PE. I led an all-male department, and it was really good to see and really good to challenge myself and challenge them on their thinking as well, because obviously they were teaching some girls' classes, and it was making sure that I was creating a curriculum that was suitable. From there, I worked as head of PE, loved it. It was brilliant. And now have taken more of a side step out of the classroom itself to work with online resourcing to make sure that teacher workload is balanced a little bit more, because I know that's that could be a whole new podcast, I think, a different side of things. To support with teacher workload there, but also have taken on a role at Leeds Beckett, sort of training teachers as well, which is really exciting. And I'm really happy to be in a position that I am at the moment. I love it. I mean, I'm back at Leeds Beckett where I trained. There's still some lecturers there that taught me, which is great. But it's also being able to see the changes that have happened as things in society have changed and things in pedagogy have changed as well. And that's been really interesting to see. And it's great to be a part of it and part of that change, and to see and to help mould the new PE teachers to be the best they can be.
Yeah, I share that privilege of working with trainee teachers as well. It's such an enjoyable part of the job, watching them grow, isn't it?
That's exactly the word I'd use, the privilege. It's privilege and exciting, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about then what you were doing as a head of PE. You briefly mentioned before that you were doing some work with Leeds Girl Can in terms of challenging stereotypes and stigmas and addressing some of the barriers that young girls face in physical education. It'd be good for the listeners to find out a little bit more about kind of what you did and how you applied it to practice and how you've implemented some of your thoughts.
Okay, so I, as you can tell, was very passionate about ensuring that we're breaking down barriers, particularly for girls. And one of the things I did to sort of get some backing and to understand it a little bit better was I was analysing after-school activities, because after-school activities in PE in the school where I was head of department were really popular. And it was really easily to see that after year 8, so within year 9, year 10 and year 11, there was a big drop off of girls. So with that in mind, particularly with the year 9 cohort that I had, I wanted to put together some intervention like you would if that had been a maths lesson and, results had suddenly dropped, you would put on intervention. And it wasn't scary intervention, it was fun intervention, I'd like to think. So with these, I put together a list of around 30 names of students that weren't accessing any physical activity outside of the classroom. And we met at lunch. And I did this in sort of partnership with the Girls Active initiative, because in my head originally, I wanted sort of these 30 girls to sort of be trained to be leaders of physical activity and role models for other students lower down the school, to give them confidence and to give them a bit of more belief in PE itself. These 30 students would have probably self-described themselves as the non-sporty girls, and probably would have felt, and I know they felt like this because some of them told me that like they didn't think that I knew who they were, or they weren't on my radar. So when I'd invited them into this session initially, they were all a little bit unsure of why their PE teacher was asking them to come. But yeah, are we in trouble? What have we done? Like, I just miss one to speak to me, kind of thing. And it was really interesting how these sessions started. So I wanted them to experience different sports initially, to sort of give them a bit more love of a variety of sports that maybe weren't accessible on the curriculum at that point. So that's where I got the help of Leeds Girl Can. Libby Cotter from the Leeds Council, she came in with some of her colleagues as well to sort of deliver some of these sessions. And there were things like around teamwork, we did ultimate frisbee, we did pop Pilates, and we did lots of different things. And that was great. And the girls got involved and they enjoyed it. But the most important thing that came out of those sessions was, because it was over lunchtime, we had pack-ups that were brought up. And in that first sort of half an hour, we'd sit around and eat the pack-ups and we'd chat. And we would pose questions to the girls about PE and about things that they liked and things that they disliked, and things that they found hard. And that half an hour was just, it was breaking down the barriers between me and them, and also providing them with that sort of, they felt valued, that I was listening to their opinions as well. With that as well, the Leeds Girl Can colleagues came in every session, and we ran this. It was only going to be sort of, we'll do it for a month and see what happens. We must have ran it from Christmas till the summer, doing it every week. And the girls would look forward to it and see me during the week and be like, Miss, are we doing the Leeds Girl Can session? And we did do physical activity, but it was more surrounding the talking and what happened. And I mean, as a result, we went to, the golf club, we did some golf, we went to the skateboarding park, we did BMX, and we did all sorts, because the girls showed that engagement that they wanted to do it. But Leeds Girl Can also receive some funding. So what then happened as a result of this was there was an opportunity for our girls, along with others, to create a community group. So they were particularly South Asian girls in this group, and they wanted to make a community group in Hare Hills that served the need to promote sport for girls and to promote community sport with women and to get more people there. So they actually created a community group that brought more of the community together. and provided that safe space. And that was something that they did themselves. So they came up with a logo, they came up with who was going to be the coaches, they came up with the activities that they were going to do. It wasn't led by me at all. I was just there to, help out if they needed anything. But the fact that the girls felt listened to and felt valued was incredible. And actually, the sort of like knock-on effect to all of this was that these 30 girls who probably previous to this had hated PE, didn't necessarily like me or really engage in the lessons, by doing that intervention and speaking with them and understanding them more, I was able to have greater relationships with them in the lessons, which then meant they wanted to work harder and they did engage. And so it was really beneficial for them and for me, and a really great learning experience.
Yeah, it's so powerful, isn't it? You talk about developing a sense of belonging, creating their own logos and their own activities. It's amazing, the impact in the community. And then also the golden nuggets of student voice. Yeah, it was about getting them active, but most importantly, and like you said, listening to their voices to shape your practice and their experiences. It's such a good example.
Absolutely. And I think I was particularly guilty of assuming I knew why they didn't want to participate. And actually, the two things that we're going to talk about today came from this group. And perhaps I hadn't been quite as aware of how much of a barrier these two things were to this particular group of girls.
Yeah, so I think it's a perfect segue really to move into the two barriers that we're going to talk about today. They, I think, have a stigma attached to them of sensitivity or possibly vulnerable topics perhaps, and maybe they're not talked about enough. I think it's a great time now to discuss why they're barriers and kind of increase the awareness of them, and perhaps discuss what we can do as teachers to encourage, nurture and support young girls in physical education.
So the two things that actually came from this group as being particular barriers or particular reasons why they didn't want to participate were periods and sports bras. And obviously these are issues that, 50% of the population, when taking part in sport or just generally, will need to consider. And like Nathan said, I don't think it's something that we do talk about enough because of the stigma attached to it. So I'm going to sort of start with periods and maybe a bit of a discussion around that, because some of the girls that I spoke to, in that study would say that they didn't want to come to school on their period. They definitely didn't want to do PE on their period, and it might mean that they would miss school if they were on their period because they didn't want to do PE, because they didn't want to get changed, and they didn't want to do physical exercise. And this sort of, I know Girls Active have done a lot of, the youth sports trusts have done a lot of research surrounding this. And in secondary school age students, the biggest reason for them not wanting to do PE is when they're on their period. That's just 40% of students said that. And that's massive. That's huge when we think about all the reasons why we don't want to do PE, but that is such a big reason that it really needs addressing and it really needs talking about a lot more. I think there's maybe some assumption in terms of periods that it's actually just the physical symptoms, in the sense of the bleeding, and that's the big taboo, and we don't want to participate because we're bleeding. But I think there's a lot of other things that sort of encompass it that we might need to discuss. So sort of there's obviously the bleeding and the uncomfortableness and the cramps and things like that are definitely an issue, but it's also thinking about how the body has changed, and not just physically. So the emotions surrounding the changes in hormones and the anxiety that you're feeling, not only just about potentially leaking and potentially someone knowing that you're on your period, or potentially the fact that you haven't, packed your sanitary products and what you're going to do and who you're going to ask, and particularly when you start and you don't know when it's going to happen, so you can't prepare yourself. And so there's a wide range of anxiety about that, but also with the hormones changing in the body, you're feeling naturally anxious anyway. You're feeling that naturally sort of irritable or moody, or particularly fatigued as well. And because this side of things isn't necessarily talked about, you don't know why you're feeling like that. So you could one day enjoy a great game of dodgeball with your friends, but the next day feel incredibly tired, incredibly irritable, and you're not too sure yourself why you're feeling those things, because we're not necessarily talking about that as a whole and talking about all the factors involved in the monthly cycle. And I think, I mean, I have definitely been guilty of this. But a child or a young girl saying that she is on a period, she don't want to do PE, and you say, you can't just have miss PE, for 5 days every month. That just can't happen. And to an extent, absolutely, we need to teach girls to cope with this situation that isn't going to go away. But I think there needs to be a level of understanding and empathy around this, and around, particularly when you're starting your period. There's girls are starting their periods much younger now, so in primary schools particularly, as well as in secondary school, that we need to be aware that this is a massive life change. What's going on, it's a big deal. We can't just expect them to be able to cope with it instantly, with the physical and sort of the emotional side of things as well. And we have got to show empathy to ensure that they feel comfortable in these sort of in the lessons in school. It's important to think about your confidence and how it can affect it. And puberty is a time when your confidence is all over the place. But to have this big life-changing event going on once a month as well, and not necessarily knowing 100% when it will happen or why it's happening or how to deal with it is something that we need to be aware of. We also need to think about that while we're going through all these hormones, talking to parents might not be the most comfortable thing either. So actually we sometimes as PE teachers might assume that, parents will be talking to their child about it, and they'll know how to, change their sanitary products, and they'll know when to do it, and they'll know all about this. But teenage girls may not want to talk to their parents about that either. And therefore, yeah, and therefore they come into school ill prepared to be able to deal with this big event that's happening to their bodies, and it just makes them feel even worse. So what I would say is that I think we need to normalize it a lot more, and normalize speaking about it a lot more. And with this, I don't just mean female teachers. I think it's so important that we, as a whole school, male staff, female staff, everyone should be talking about periods and what happens, and how you should be feeling, and that it's okay, and that some things can help and some things might not. And the fact that, as well, I've gone off on a tangent, I'm really sorry, but one of the things that really frustrates me about period education, I'd hope that it doesn't happen like this anymore, but I think it still does, is perhaps in primary school, your class is there, the girls get taken to the library with a nurse who's come in from an outside agency. The boys stay in the classroom and do something else. The girls get taught about periods from an outside agency, and the boys, stay and don't learn anything about what's actually happening. And there's a lot of things wrong with that, in terms of, firstly, you've got someone from an outside agency coming in to talk to the girls about periods, when realistically, if we're going to normalize it, it should be the normal teacher who they see every day. But also that big issue of taking boys out, that they don't need to learn about it. Of course they need to learn about it. They need to learn, their mums, their sisters, their potential wives, their daughters, they need to know these things. And it's amazing. I've spoken to my friends about this, and they've sort of given me stories of where a male has said something to them that's completely wrong, but they just haven't been educated. So how can you blame them? And I think that links as well to male teachers, is that, at teacher training, places, are we training male PE teachers, male teachers in general, to be understanding what's going on? I think it's really important that sanitary products should be available from all teachers in all locations. I mean, a lot of schools do have, either at the front desk or somewhere safe for girls to go to get sanitary products if they need them. But I mean, we all know what it's like in a school. It's a busy day, and it's a busy day for children as well. And if on their break time they've got to go all the way, from the top floor down to reception and then queue for the toilet because everyone's using the toilet, they might not have that much time to actually logistically change their sanitary products. And therefore, it would make so much easier if the teacher that they had at the time, they could just quickly ask for one. And I think, I mean, at my last school, we all had first aid kits, so we all would put sanitary products in there. So if students asked you on the run, you could quickly give them to them. But, teachers in classrooms, they have drawers. A history teacher, they could easily put sanitary towels in there ready for if a student asked them. And I think that would help reduce the stigma around it if they knew that every teacher was able to provide these products so that it was easier for them.
Yeah, so I guess it's normalising it, isn't it? Like removing the taboo of it, then the students will feel more comfortable maybe with talking to people and their teachers about it. I guess, and you mentioned it's about, or being about the physical and the emotional, but I feel it's also the social aspect as well, right? In terms of finding themselves in their peer group, and maybe when a young girl starts her period, her position in the social group changes, or maybe in the class. And they're quite difficult things to manage as well, aren't they?
Absolutely. And we all know sort of the friendship issues that can occur and how, you feel so self-conscious, and friendships can be fickle in younger year groups, and, they can be friends one minute and not the other. And things like periods and the emotions that you're feeling are just going to sort of exaggerate that. Absolutely, to do with your social. And I remember feeling that the worst feeling ever was someone knowing that I was on my period. And why? Because I just think as well that, if we had a headache, we would tell any member of staff. It's not got a taboo. We would go to the office, we'd get a glass of water, whatever we needed. A headache doesn't have taboo. Yet there's this, it should be the same because, 50% of the population have periods. So if they need something to support them managing that period, then they should just be able to say it, like if they had a headache. But unfortunately, because there's this stigma around it and this stigma around talking about it, then children do feel that they can't speak to teachers about it. It's an interesting one in PE as well, because we have the changing rooms, which are obviously can be a place of anxiety for some children. And I think sort of being on your period can aggravate that as well. Changing rooms aren't lucky enough to all have cubicles and private areas. And I just think about it now that, if I played rugby and then had to get changed with my team when I was on my period after being really sweaty and sort of being given the time limit that the PE teacher's given me because I've got to get to maths on time. So I've only got 4 minutes. I already feel anxious about that. And I am someone that loves PE and loves sport, and I'm quite comfortable with my body. But if you think about these other, the children that we're making do this, it's not a comfortable environment. And equally on the flip side, that I do understand teachers, want the students to be active, that there isn't always an easy solution to this. But I think part of it is being empathetic and understanding that this is a real issue and does cause a barrier to girls wanting to be physically active. Like we said at the start, some students didn't want to come to school when they had PE and they were on their periods. So what can we do?
Yeah, so we were talking before we started recording today about my time when I was in the Middle East, and in particular in Doha and in Qatar, and young girls, and how the menstrual cycle maybe impacts them and their learning. Some girls had the right to keep the information private. They didn't want to let anyone else know. But depending on some of the religions and cultures in the Middle East, it becomes quite obvious. For example, a young girl last week wasn't wearing a headscarf, and this week she's coming in wearing a shayla or hijab. It's become quite obvious that maybe she started the menstrual cycle and she didn't get to hide that from anywhere else, and now she has to fit in with the rest of the group and maybe feel that sense of perhaps like embarrassment or a negative image of her body. So there's lots of things we have to consider as well, with obviously the barrier being the thing, but also the social, the cultural considerations as well, right?
Absolutely. And I think it wouldn't be a challenge if the stigma surrounding it wasn't there. And I think that that's the bit that we as educators just need to challenge in ourselves, challenge in our schools, and just really put out there. And one of the things I wanted to mention is sort of the period poverty, and the fact that not only might girls struggle to speak to their parents about it or let them know that they're on their period, but also, particularly in this current climate, like families are not always have freely disposable income, and therefore, period products can cost a lot of money. There are ways which they can make them cheaper, but that is something that can be hard to manage themselves. And schools can opt into the period product scheme. I'd hope a lot of schools out there are already doing that. The government do that, so they get free period products that can be given to students in school, and that's really good because it's not just sanitary towels and tampons, which some students don't find comfortable either. There's also menstrual cups and period pants in a variety of sizes. So that's really great. That's one thing that's happening that's really great, is that there's a now sort of a wider scope of period products. So it can be more comfortable for different females to be on their period while doing exercise, or making it fit around their lives, which is really good. And there is a lot more talk to try and normalize this stigma, but I do feel there's a lot more talk from women. And I think where it's sort of missing something is having those sort of male allies around as well. And what better place to have male allies than in a school, and to have that sort of male role model, being able to discuss it with boys, because the boys need to know what's going on. And I think that is crucial in making the girls feel more comfortable. Yeah,
there's lots of food for thought there, isn't there? Lots of opportunities to reflect on that, particularly the education of young boys, making sure that they get that pivotal education at the same time as the girls, and reducing the stigma to make students feel more comfortable about talking about this. Okay, let's move on now then to the second barrier that you mentioned, which is that of sports bras.
So again, similar to the periods, I feel like sports bras are not necessarily talked about enough. And a girl's body changes, and it changes quite quickly. It can go from completely flat chested, don't need any kind of support, to suddenly you've got breasts that have grown. And again, a tricky conversation to bring up with your parents that you might need sports bras. Again, they're quite expensive. There's barriers surrounding that. But yeah, it's really tricky when we're talking about physical education, because that's a point when this body change becomes really obvious, when you're being made to run or jump. And it can feel quite painful. It can feel really uncomfortable. And you're just worrying that everyone is looking at you while everything is moving. And, that is a time, especially when they're going through puberty, when you're already feeling anxious and you're already feeling a bit vulnerable, that this can add to that as well. Sports bras are really important, whether you've got big breasts or smaller breasts, because the breast tissue is sort of a fatty tissue that can get damaged really quickly from over moving. And that's where it's important that a correct fitting sports bra is worn. Now, one of the things we have in PE is that girls might feel uncomfortable like changing a bra in PE. So what I think happens is a lot of girls will either choose not to wear a sports bra because they don't want to have to change, or they just wear a sports bra for the day, which again, that would be okay. But often sports bras are a lot tighter, because they are a correct fitting one are a lot tighter to keep the breasts in place. So then that leads to a day of feeling really uncomfortable. Who was it? Eleanor Cardwell from the England netball team. She did a big campaign about sports bras last year, actually. Yeah, she spoke about her experience where even she loved sport, she loved PE, but as her body changed really quickly, and she had to wear these sports bras that gave her blisters because she wanted to wear them all day because she didn't want to have to get changed in the changing room. And I think again, we need to talk about this. One thing that is potentially an option, but again might not be suitable for every context of school, is that, a kit list goes out, doesn't it, saying, you need this polo shirt and these shorts or whatever, that maybe to put on the kit list sports bras. Now, again, this could be a bit of a contention if the school is from maybe a lower socio-economic status area, because another thing to buy, you can imagine for parents that might get some backlash. However, even the fact that you'd put it on the kit list would mean that it would raise awareness that it's needed. And there is a variety of sports bras. Sports bras are becoming a bit more fashionable. But then I'd argue that sometimes the more fashionable ones aren't as supportive. However, the fact that they are becoming a bit more fashionable, it means that cheaper outlets are, stocking them, and they are becoming sort of more trendy to wear, which is something that's really, really great and enables girls to sort of feel more comfortable wearing them in PE lessons as well. But yeah, it's interesting. I was reading some stats about this last night, and where was it? It was from Jess Pinchek at the Open University. 40% of women, when they exercise, don't wear a sports bra. And that's going to just impact on their physical health, but also their emotional health as well, and their mental health about feeling self-conscious while they're doing exercise. So again, I think it's a really important topic to talk about, and it's not necessarily saying that every student has to wear one, making that a rule and creating barriers there, but also making sure that students understand why they have to wear one.
Yeah, and I guess it's like everything else, it's raising awareness, right? So
exactly,
then the young girls know how it's going to benefit their body when they're moving, and particularly as PE teachers, it's a good message to share.
Because linking back to the group that I did the work with, one of the things we brought up was sports bras, and there was a good half of them that didn't realise they had to wear them. And that was really interesting, and that, has really developed my practice, that I need to speak about it more. I need to educate as part of my role as a PE teacher.
Yeah, so I guess it goes back to your previous point you made about male PE teachers being confident and comfortable talking about this, and I guess some would feel maybe uncomfortable with talking about this.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that we need to be conscious of and working towards improving. And today you've raised two maybe quite obvious barriers for young girls in physical education, but perhaps two that we don't talk about enough, and two that we need to do more work on improving. And you've provided some really good examples of how you can do that with young learners, and pose some questions that PE teachers should maybe reflect on in terms of their own practice. So thank you for raising the awareness of these, really.
That's fine.
So let's move on then to the quickfire questions. The first question is, what are your 3 non-negotiables for positive experiences for all in physical education?
So my first one is just relationships, and building good relationships and getting to know each and every one of your students, which is really hard when you have lots of classes to teach, but making sure that they feel comfortable, and that will only come from building those relationships. Learn students' names, learn information about them, get to know them and get to know how they work, so that they feel comfortable and safe in your environment. So the second one, I think, would be consistency. Again, linking back to feeling safe. PE can sometimes be very different from lesson to lesson, but children do feel safer when they know what's coming and they know what to expect. And therefore, having consistent boundaries, having consistent expectations, and not changing the goalposts in terms of what you expect students to do. They know how lessons are going to be. They know what to expect, and therefore they feel safe. And particularly at a time when, particularly at a time when perhaps a girl is feeling more anxious and vulnerable, knowing that they're going to come to a PE lesson and knowing exactly what they're going to expect. They're going to have this amount of changing time. Miss is going to ask them to do this, then they're going to do that. Like, knowing to an extent what they're going to be expected to do will make them feel safer and more comfortable about participating. And then enjoyable as well. And I think sort of this comes with twofold, in the sense that, yes, we want lessons to be fun, but I think enjoyable doesn't have to be, your traditional really fun lesson with all the bells and whistles and everything else. It's about them. Fun can be a javelin lesson where they've made progress and they're really keen on their technique, and by altering a technique they've improved massively, and they've really enjoyed that sense of belief and that sense of confidence that they've got from it as well. So ensuring that enjoyment is pitched to the needs of the students as well.
Yeah, that's nice, and I think it links nicely to the meaningful PE framework as well. So that learning should be personally relevant, and that fun is good, but also fun is very subjective, and that, you know, the development of motor competence in personally relevant settings equals most of the time some form of enjoyment and motivation. And I think going back to your consistency point about what you said earlier about consistent messages from the male and female PE teacher, if the male teacher is saying the same as the female PE teacher with relation to periods and sports bras, then that's going to ensure they get a consistent message and feel more supported, I guess.
Absolutely. And that was something I had to address when I was head of PE, because male PE teachers would sometimes allow them to sit out of a lesson. And that was something that I wanted to challenge, because I didn't necessarily want them to have to come and join in 100% and feel awkward and uncomfortable, but it was something that we needed to be consistent about. And that's maybe something that departments need to talk about, of what is the consistent approach and what needs to be done as a team.
Yeah, that's really important. Thank you for that. So next question. If you had a personal mantra, what would it be?
My personal mantra is to just work hard and be nice. I think as long as you do those things, you get by in life. I think it's really important that, people are driven and people want to do well, but as long as you be the best you can be and you go about it in the right way, then things are good.
Nice. A pretty simple one to live by, and I think a lot of people could take note to that. Next question then, and quite a controversial one. If you could remove anything from the PE curriculum or PE settings, what would it be?
So, yeah, there could be lots of things to change, but I think where I'm at the moment, the thing that I think needs addressing in PE is the changing room dynamic and the changing room itself. I mean, this isn't an easy fix. Often changing rooms are in quite a small area, cubicles, 30 cubicles or 40 cubicles in an area is maybe not the right solution. And also there's safeguarding issues there as well. But something about getting changed for PE, it just doesn't sit right with me. And I think it can be a place of severe anxiety for children. And I think when we probably speak to people, they'll always tell you some story about the changing room. And I think something needs to be done to address the changing room climate for PE.
Yeah, again, another powerful message and something for us all to reflect on. I think you'd have a thoroughly enjoyable conversation with Kate Reynolds, the previous guest, around changing rooms and those as a barrier. Great stuff. So finally then, what would be your golden message for all PE teachers?
So my golden nugget, I think, would be to challenge your thinking and to openly agree or disagree with your thoughts. And what I mean by that is that sometimes we think that just because we did PE like this, or because PE has always been done like this, or because these things have always happened, that we should just can't continue that. And I think sometimes this kind of maybe links back to Amina's point a few podcasts ago about challenging that unconscious bias. For example, just because we don't talk about periods because it's a stigmatized topic, we should continue to not do that. Just because males have never carried sanitary products in their first aid kit, does that mean that we don't do it now? I mean, I think in order to be reflective, in order to be better practitioners, we need to constantly think about how we can make PE better, which is maybe challenging those things that are ingrained already in us, and sort of acknowledging how we can adapt those to make more students happier in PE.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice, pertinent link back to Amina's episode around challenging stereotypes and unconscious bias, and not accepting that just because something has happened before, we should continue to accept it as taken and given
Absolutely.
practice. So yeah, really, really important. Thank you for raising the awareness of these potential barriers for young girls, and thank you for being a champion for them. I hope the listeners are reflecting on their practice in their settings and thinking about how they can support young girls to overcome these barriers and have positive experiences in physical education. Louise, it's been a privilege having a chat with you this morning. Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming on the PE Insights podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Nathan.